Well, I'm here today with Tamsen Fadal. Tamsen's a lady we all know if we live in the New York area because she's been a mainstay of the news scene for 30 years or so, which is hard to imagine that anyone could be doing it that well, that long, and still be only 11 years old. But that is the case. Tamsin, I'm intrigued by your career and all the things that you're interested in. And we last saw one another in person when you spoke at an event in spring of last year in New York. It was the Worth Women's event. And you did a terrific panel there and touched on so many subjects was so interesting. You had that couple of few hundred people there in the palm of your hand listening to your story. Not surprisingly, because you're a pro, but also because your personal story is one that so many people identify with and respect and appreciate. And I think what we catch you at a point where you've made a major, major change in your career direction, choosing to focus on the things that are of genuine interest to you, and that you have great evidence that there's an audience of people who have a genuine interest in those same subjects, and they really look to you for guidance, for inspiration, for information. Tell us about that shift and how it came about.
Yeah, well, thank you for that introduction. First off, I don't know if it was a shift I ever thought I was going to make or feel comfortable making, but I think it shifted me. Listening to women's stories, hitting midlife, hitting the age my mother was when she died, and it really changed a lot for me. It changed my perception of what I wanted, what I consider to be my passion or my purpose. And I have done news for a long time, and I'm a journalist, to the core. I always will be. I've always loved the art of storytelling, how stories affect other people and instigate change and help you see things differently. And I think that's just what I'm doing in another way right now is, telling stories, specifically stories of women and women in midlife.
You say it's been in your blood. I'm sure you get people, particularly women, who will come up to you and say, I want to do what you did. And it's a terribly tight pyramid of people who want to be in the journalism field, want to be in the broadcast journalism field in particular. It really is a tough place to get to the top two like you did. What is your advice to the women who come to you and tell you, I'd like to be you?
Oh, I listen, I never thought I was going to get to where I got it. It was always my dream to get to New York, but I always had my eye on what I wanted. I always had my eye on where I wanted to be and why I wanted to be here. I wanted to be able to tell stories in a market like this and tell the stories of New York. It's always been, I say I always have like this relationship and this romance with New York. I really did. I lived in Albany for a long time, so we came back and forth to the city a lot. But I would say that you have to pay attention to what you want. You have to be willing to do all the jobs. Like I didn't start doing that. I did all the jobs. I was out carrying the camera on a football field, to make an extra $25 a week. I was, the things that we don't see, right?
Sure.
The things we don't see are the things that are always the thing we have to remind people about. And so, I started in market 145 in Oak Hill, West Virginia. That's where I began my career. And I
Was
lived in
that in radio or TV?
that was in TV. I started in radio in Tampa, St. Pete, and I did that for a year out of college, and then I moved. I was a producer, and then I wound up being on the air, and then I moved to Oak Hill, West Virginia, and I lived like right on the top of a mountain, and slid down the mountain with my car to get to the studio, which is in an old bowling alley, and we'd be doing the news, and we'd hear the pins cracking on this, so, there's a lot of those times way before being in New York, though, that grew me and made me be appreciative of being here. But really, at the end of the day, it was always people's stories that I loved, whether it was in Oak Hill, West Virginia, or New York, or Afghanistan, or bringing stories of our troops home. Those are always stories that kept me moving and kept me motivated.
People, when they meet you, they don't know you, but they see you in public. They feel like they know you because you have that kind of an infectious personality and been on the air here in New York for those 30 years. Uh, I would guess that there's some really funny situations where people come up to you and just start a conversation like you just finished one a minute ago.
Yeah, but I love that. I mean, that lets me know that, when you're in news and you have these consultants come in and they're like, talk to somebody like you're in their living room because that's where you are. And you go, oh, okay. But the truth is that really is what it's like. You are in their living room. You're in I have people come up to me and say, like, we go to bed with you every night. And I go, what?
Hello.
Understand what they're saying. Like they literally go to bed with me every night. And so I just that always warms my heart. I love hearing that. It kind of tickles me too. And people do start mid conversation, but I like that. And part of the benefits of social media have been to be able to have a conversation back and forth with them, not just at them. So it's been really nice to be able to communicate and then know who that audience is. So I mean that creates a community, and that's really what you want at the end of the day, right? Like you don't want a newscaster just speaking at you and telling you the news. You want them to be living in your community and know who you are and understand what you're going through and understand that it's terrible and the subway is delayed, or that nobody knows how to drive in the rain for some reason, and they want all those things. And so it was a very hard decision to leave that job, but I always feel like my career will be that in journalism.
Well, that's the amazing thing. You have an amazing social media presence now. And were you very early to social media? Was that something that intrigued you very early in its development?
It's funny. I was thinking about it recently because I was looking through some old pictures, because when I first got interested in social media, it was when it was Facebook, just Facebook. And I was doing the 4 a.m. show, and I was solo anchoring. So I was just really alone. It was like me, two cameramen, and like the weather person and maybe a traffic person. And so when Facebook kind of came on the scene, it was maybe about a year or so into it. And I took this pink Apple computer out on the desk. I remember I opened it up and I'm like, I'm gonna say hi to people. If you guys are on Facebook, say hi to me, and then I'll say hi to you on the air. I was like, I thought it was so innovative at the time. I was like, oh, this is what we're gonna do. And I did. And I would have moms that were getting up and getting their kids ready for school. And so then I knew them by first name, and I'd get up in the morning and say hello online. And then I'd say hello on TV, and they'd say hi back. And so I really enjoyed that process of speaking with these people versus at them. And so, and then I knew who I was talking to, then I knew whose living room I was in. So yeah, that was always real exciting to me. And then, as it progressed, and there was Twitter, and then there was Instagram, and, I've always had a real interest in it, because for all the things that can be very difficult about it and concerning about it, there are communities that are established there that can really make people feel like they're not alone. And that's certainly what I've, discovered over the last few years anyway.
Yeah, it's amazing. We talk about here a lot the fact that you have this wonderful capability now with social media to connect people, and yet seems like people seem less connected than ever in terms of measuring loneliness and engagement. And so you were early to the process of trying to create an engaged two-way community. And what platform do you think you're most active on now? Instagram seems to be the platform that I see you have a terrific presence on.
Yeah, I think Instagram and Facebook still are the two, because I think that there's a lot of overlap in the audience and in the age. I think
Well, how do you think about TikTok?
Yeah, and third would be TikTok. I like TikTok. When I first, it was the first one though I actually got on talking about really personal things, and
Oh,
that
really?
was, yeah, because my Instagram was photos of work, and like, here's me reading the news. And it was very clean and safe, and then on TikTok, I'm like, I don't know anyone on here. I'm gonna just say whatever I want. And so that's what I did. And one of the early videos, I think it was during the pandemic, I'm pretty sure, because I was in my back bedroom anchoring the news from the apartment because we couldn't leave, and I'll just read all the signs of symptoms of menopause. I'm just going to read them. And that's what I did on TikTok. And that's kind of how it started,
Hmm.
the way it started. But that's how it started. I didn't know anybody. So I was like, what do I have to lose? I'm just going to read it and see who's out there. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, there's a lot of people out here that want the same thing. And then I snuck over to Instagram, and then finally, Facebook, which I had been on since, I don't know what year, 2008, maybe.
It's amazing to see how this is impacting careers, none more than yours, in terms of you making the leap to say, I want a two-way opportunity. I want to create community, and I want to talk about the subjects that are meaningful and important to you, and obviously to the community of people who have expressed their interest in staying connected with you. Tell me, take me back. You were born in Massachusetts, but went to school in Florida. What happened in between? How did that happen?
I did. I was born in Concord, Massachusetts. I do not remember it. I was really young. We moved to Albany, New York,
Uh-huh.
and we were in Albany, New York until I was 7. And my dad's from Texas originally, so we lived there for a little while due to his job. He's an architect, and then we wound up moving to Tampa, Florida, and we were in Tampa, and I went to school there and did my first radio job there
Yeah.
before podcasts.
Have you been back to Tampa lately?
Yeah, I go all the time. I go all the time. My family is still there. Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing the development there.
Unbelievable. Isn't it unbelievable? It's really interesting because I went to my last 2 years of college there at the University of South Florida. And then I started at Rollins in Orlando, Winter Park area, but I just am always it blows my mind a little bit because when I hear people go like, "Oh, we want to move to Tampa," and I'm like, "You do?" So because when you grow up someplace, you're like, there, you can't wait to get out. But I go back now and I really enjoy it because there's so much newness to it all, right? There's a whole downtown area. A
The
lot of
whole
people.
waterfront area.
The waterfront St. Pete is just really, St. Pete was like the place you went to retire. Now, people can't get in there fast enough. So it's pretty exciting to see.
I was at a conference in Lake Nona
Yes.
last week, which is in Orlando, and it's
Yeah.
amazing. Talk about newness there. This company Tavistock is building a new city, and it's just amazing to see. And you being a Florida school product,
Yeah.
they were telling me last week that the University of Central Florida is now the second largest student body of any college in the country.
Isn't that amazing?
I think it's 63 or 65,000, they were telling me.
Wow. I went to University of South Florida, which at the time was like, yeah, a campus and people lived on it, but not that many. We didn't even have a football team. And now, I was part of the student government that fought for a football team back then. It had something to do. And yeah, so it's really interesting. And UCF too is that same type of school.
It's amazing to see. I don't understand their world, that whole long-term, long-range uh, real estate development world where they're building a planned community, a city, and now they just triple the size of the property. They have 17,000 acres, which makes the land size bigger than Manhattan. And now they just acquired 30,000 more acres to continue that development north as they move toward Cape Canaveral. That's
Wow.
not for the faint of heart.
No, what's the company?
The company's called Tavistock Group,
Wow. That's
and
amazing.
they've been in hospitality and real estate development for a long time.
If you go
They,
into St. Pete now, you go into downtown and you don't even recognize it. I mean, it used to be desolate and deserted, and now it's like you can barely get through to get over to the water.
I was there last spring. Each of my two sisters have places in St. Pete, second homes, and we went to visit them late last spring, and we stayed on Clearwater Beach. I could not believe how it built up and how nice the beach is. But as you mentioned, it was a Saturday afternoon. We got there. It was around 4 o'clock, and it must have taken an hour to go over the bridge onto the beach.
It's amazing. It's just amazing. That has changed quite a bit.
There was a cow town, probably, as you
Yes,
remember it.
that's exactly what I remember.
So tell me what's in your portfolio of things that you're doing now, Tamsen.
Sure. I have a documentary that's in the works actually for October release, and so I'm excited about that.
I
And
caught a few minutes of your Broadway show the other day.
oh, very nice. Thank you. I
Yeah.
just got back from filming actually.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, yeah, and that's the other thing that I produce through my production company. I've always been a huge fan of the arts, and especially, especially in New York when these kids come here from all over and they're like, I want to be on Broadway, and then they're on Broadway. And so I really love those stories. And so I'm fortunate enough to be partnered with the John Gore organization, and we, cover Broadway. We cover the stories of Broadway, the stories behind the scenes of, the names that you don't see in the playbill. Because I really think that it takes a lot to put a production like that together. Broadway employs a lot of people. We certainly saw that during the pandemic. So I get excited about it. We started as a special 4 times a year, and we've now 52 weeks a year. The show airs in close to 150 markets
Wow,
across
that's
the.
terrific.
Thank you. Yeah. So it's in a lot of these different cities, where some have have local theater and some don't. And so it's exciting to see that message spread anyway. So somebody wants to come to New York or wants to go to to Orlando and go to the Bob Carr, they know what they want to see. So it's
Yeah.
nice.
And do you get to a lot of shows?
I try to go to as many as I can. I didn't because of news for a long time because every
Sure.
night I was on the air.
That's your busy time. You're a
Yeah,
conflict.
that was the time I was preoccupied. I do go to a few more now. I just went and saw Doubt, which is back on Broadway, and so there's a few. I went and saw Back to the Future with my nephew because he's 12 and he
Uh-huh.
loves are on stage, and so I feel like there's beginning to be something for everybody, and I think that that's what's really important is that there are a lot of different stories on Broadway, and
Is
it's not.
Broadway fully back now?
Oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
fully.
Attendance has returned to pre-pandemic
Yeah,
levels?
I don't know the most recent numbers. I know that I was in a packed theater with not one seat open, so that was nice to see. And I think that people feel safe, going back. I mean, I don't think there's any question about it. And I think that it's a matter of now people being exposed to the new shows that are out. And that's really what we try to do is play that part and make sure that people know what's coming, know what's going, know how long they have to see it, know where it's touring, because a lot of these shows go on tour after they leave Broadway. And so
Which is
there's
where they make the real money.
yeah, right. But it's always so fun to see. Like when my dad was living in Orlando, I remember him. They couldn't wait for the shows to come there. So it's just really it's exciting to see. And my nephew loves Broadway, so he gets to do that in Florida as well as in New York. And so I started him a little album of playbills so he can flip through them. And every time he comes, we get a playbill for him to put in there.
That's
So it's
great.
nice.
The journey of all these young people to Broadway, as you say, is so interesting. I'm not exposed to it very often, but my wife and I were lucky enough to go to be invited to go to see Hamilton the last night that Lin-Manuel Miranda was in the show. And I know you have a story about him in Puerto Rico I'd like to ask you about. But I remember we were invited to the after party, and we were there at the after party early. And a lot of celebrities there, a lot of people from government. I remember Hillary Clinton was there, and Secretary of State was there, and there were a lot of interesting folks. And I see these. We were a group about 7 or 8 or 9 of us standing chatting, and I see these three young ladies off to the side. And I said, I said to my wife, I said, I think those were dancers in the show. And she said, no, I don't think so. I said, no, that one guy has such an unusual hairdo with a little like pillbox off to the side. So I went over and, shy as I am, asked them. And yes, they were in the play. I said, do you mind if I bring you over and introduce you to my friends? And we were having a wonderful chat with them. And the one young lady with the unusual hairdo, she was telling us that she was from deep backwoods, Alabama. And one of the ladies in our group was also from Alabama, a couple of generations removed. So I got to introduce them, and they caught up. And you hear these stories of people trying and saving their money, coming to the city, trying out, and nothing ever happens. She said it was the first play she tried out for. She
Wow, that's
hits the
amazing.
lottery with Hamilton, has been in it since the beginning.
Where do you go after that, right?
So we were asking, so where do you live? So she lives up on 138th Street. And I said, well, how do you get to work? I take the subway. And, what do you do in your time off? How do you manage your time? It was just so interesting to hear about their lives. And I said, so what about tonight? She goes, no, tonight I'm treating myself to a cab ride home. So
I love that.
they're
I think
still real people.
oh, 100%. I think that's what's also special about Broadway is that they're real actors, and that's why I think a lot of people that are real actors come back to Broadway. You see these big names and big people,
They
and you
still
go,
want to do it.
many times a week, but that's their heart and soul. And so live theater, live performance in front of people. I mean, I give it to them. You don't have to do that. You could go on the set and make a lot of money, but they choose to come back to Broadway and perform, and that's why we always like to give them their due. But yeah, I do love those stories because I don't think there's nowhere else where you've got like you're walking around the street and you're like, oh my gosh, I think I just saw you on stage last night. So I do think that it's really special, and I think that it keeps it really real for them too, so they all always know who their audience is as well. So I think that's important.
I will tell you, the conversation ended when the music turned from light cocktail music to something with a beat to it, because
Yeah,
these three young ladies started moving in ways that I don't remember ever being
yeah.
able to move, and they drifted off to the dance floor.
That's
But
great.
tell us about your experience with Hamilton in Puerto Rico.
we were invited to go there when the show opened there, and Lynn was there, and his father, and so it was
Who's a
really,
terrific guy.
yeah, it was really special. It was it was just neat to see him there and the community and just the excitement of it all. And I mean, I'm a huge fan of the show. Obviously, I saw it with him in it here, and then to watch it there was it was just really neat and special. And so we were there literally for a 1 day turnaround. That's what we did. And Lynn
Wow.
came afterward, and we interviewed the him and the cast. And
And that was pretty soon after the hurricane, no?
it
Yeah.
was, that was the whole, yeah, that was really the whole purpose of it, to kind of just show, where things were at that point.
Uh-huh.
But, he's always really gracious as I mean, he's got such, fame and stardom now, but he's always really gracious. And I do always look for that in people, because I think that that really determines success. I think people that are gracious and, still real people, as you said, I think that makes all the difference in the world. And it also is a great example for young people too, because that's how it should be.
We were invited to go to the Tony's one night, and it was uptown, maybe at the Beacon Theater. And I remember sitting in the balcony, in the front row of the balcony, so we had a beautiful view of the audience below us. And I know Lynn's dad, and I know the special relationship they have. And Lynn is such a talented person. And I love the relationship father and son have. And his father was sitting directly behind him, and that was the year he won all the awards.
Oh, wow.
And I remember just watching the interaction between father and son, kept turning around to his father when an award had come up, and the show got it or they didn't get it. And I was focused on them the whole night.
Yeah, that was a real show.
It really was to see the special relationship. And of course, his dad is a very smart and talented man, and that's become an industry. Their whole company and the Hamilton product and brand has just become. I remember when he was commuting to London to open the show there, and of course, it's been a huge hit there too. It's an interesting world, but I do respect the fact that he's been good at managing his career beyond his own product and doing Disney work and being in Mary Poppins. I thought that was so smart of him to make sure he shows the breadth of his talent and the breadth of his capabilities, and to attract different kinds of audiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And bringing young people up with him, I think, is a really big deal.
Yep, indeed. I know from your comments at the Worth Women's event last year that nutrition is very important to you, and you've become very serious about being certified in nutrition, and that the whole subject of menopause and exposing people to the new medical sciences that are treating and impacting menopause is something that's near and dear to your heart. How do you weave those two interests into your community today?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I graduated from IIN. I went back to school and did that when I was still working, because I felt like it was really important for me to go to nutrition school and learn a little bit more about wellness and lifestyle and integrative nutrition in particular. And I've realized what a big impact it has. I think for a long time, especially working crazy hours, whether it was 2 o'clock in the morning or till midnight every night, or 16 hours, 17 hours, 5 days in a row, whatever it was, covering stories and that hustle and that stress. I thought, like, I'll deal with that someday. I'll deal with my wellness someday. I'll sleep someday. I need 3 hours of sleep. I'm fine. And I really realized, like, when I hit midlife and I hit menopause, and I realized I was not sleeping the same way, not feeling the same way. My stomach didn't feel the same way. My health didn't feel the same way. I was exhausted all the time. And I wanted to be able to do something about it long term. And having a mom, I lost my mother to breast cancer, and just,
She
I know.
was 50, 51 when she passed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, I just realized how important that part of health is that we can do something about. And so that's where that came. So I try to integrate that as much as possible. We actually just gave away with IIN a scholarship to send somebody to school and help them out. And I hope we're able to do more in time, because the Institute for Integrative Nutrition was really, it was really beneficial to me, and it taught me a lot. And I hope, to be able to do more. But I just, I think it's not just about the food we eat. It's every part of our lifestyle. Nutrition is about what nourishes us in more ways than just what's on our plate.
It must get you a little crazy to see how we've all become so dependent on processed and packaged foods.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because it's funny, like I didn't before wellness became a term, the old school health food stores that nobody went into that smelled weird with vitamins or
Yes.
so so I have talked about that and known about that for a long time. And it is nice to see people being aware of that now. And it's nice that it's not like some other weird thing, like it's actually embraced. And so I like to see that, but I want to see other people get access to what they need and get that information that they need too, because I think it's super important. I mean, I found myself teaching my 84-year-old dad about it because the way he grew up was a different way. It was a different generation. It was a different, what's the norm? What do you eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? So, yeah, it
But
does.
just think in the 20, 30 years that you've been in New York City, how the access to good food and healthy food has changed. The different markets that didn't exist before that are all over town now. Because we know there's some places that are good food deserts, but in terms of the areas that we have access to, it's better than ever.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then, and I've seen more of these companies pop up too that are trying to make sure that people have access in different ways. And so I feel like that's so important. And I feel like it's also important to take advantage of them too. Instead of just it's not the easiest thing in the whole wide world to cook and try to do it the healthy way, but it is beneficial long term.
Tamsin, in your career, I'm intrigued by the fact that you not only covered New York and the whole tri-state region so thoroughly all these years, but you got to do some interesting travel. You mentioned the travel to Puerto Rico to cover Hamilton, but you mentioned in the earliest part of our conversation about Afghanistan. Tell me about that. What was that like?
Yeah, I was young. Yeah, I think it was really, I think it was life altering at that time for me because I'd never covered any stories like that. I was a local news reporter my whole life. I did investigative pieces, I did hurricanes, I did crimes, I did long-term what we call sweep pieces to help bring somebody, bring justice to somebody or some community. But I had never done anything like that. And when the Air Force had asked us to come and to be embedded, that was a first for me. And that was as a journey you had to prepare for and get your shots for. I didn't understand, I've never had exposure to anything like that. And once you're there, you're really on your own. Like we didn't have cell phones. There was like a satellite phone that you could use if one time during the entire trip, to check back at home. And then when you go out, when you leave the military base and then you go out into the cities and you go into Kandahar, Kabul, you're on your own, you're on your own to figure it out. And
Is there a producer or just you and a camera?
yeah, you cameraman. We didn't have a producer with us at the time. Yeah, I had cameramen. That was what I had with me. But I think it was more so like not, you're exposed to this whole new world, and not just that, but war and seeing what these soldiers are going through to, every day, like on the phone, waiting in line hours and hours to like talk to the newborn baby, or, being in the middle of the city where the Taliban was still operating underground. And so you've got women that, you try to go and talk to somebody or look at somebody, they would run the other direction out of fear. So I had never been exposed to anything like that before. And I guess I just remember coming back. I was working in Philly at CBS at the time. And I remember coming back into the city and like looking at the skyline and going like, what? I don't even know how to process where I am now, where I was. And so it took a long time. And I think I'm so grateful for that experience. I think, I learned a lot about what I didn't know, like what I didn't know that it took to keep us safe, what I didn't know that it took for young people who are enlisting, what I didn't know about, fighting, and when I didn't know about different kinds of danger and what children were living in when they were walking across minefields to try to, to get to go play. So I learned a lot.
It sounds like it's like you said, a life-changing experience.
Was.
Were you struck by, when we hear about the soldiers, and now you got to see them up close without their helmets on, these young men and women, and were you struck by how young they were?
Oh, beyond. I don't think I mean, I didn't ever think about it. Like I had dated somebody that went into the Navy. And I guess like at the time I didn't think was young, but as you get older and you look at somebody else, like, oh
Yeah.
wait, that's young. Um, So, but yeah, so young and afraid in so many ways, and away from home for the first time, or leaving
Lonely.
leaving a new wife, just trying to make a phone call, and then not knowing when they were coming home. That's the other thing. It wasn't like my trip where I knew we were in and we were out. It wasn't like, oh, okay, when we get back home, it was, when do we get back home? So
And how has it changed, do you think, when people say, we should get our troops involved over X and Y? Has it changed your thoughts about how we flex our muscle, how we play our role in the world?
yeah, I don't know if it has. I mean, I think that I think I'm but just very aware and very cognizant of what that means. I think I don't think of the masses as much as I think of like one person, like I just remember one guy in particular who was very, very, very young, and yeah, I just remember thinking like, gosh, I think he's like my brother's age. Like I just remember, and young now must be seem really young to me, but this was years ago. But I don't think of people in masses anymore as much as individuals.
I can't imagine what that experience is like. The only thing I had that was remotely close to that was I made a trip with the Secretary of Defense one time. They had these JCOC trips. They'd take about 20 or so people, and you'd make a week-long trip through a different theater. And mine was Europe and the Mediterranean. I remember being struck by A, how young they all were, B, what an amazing long reach the U.S. has globally, acting as the global policeman, whether we like it or not. We're the only ones that have those capabilities. And I remember sitting down on a amphibious assault carrier with two young men, having lunch with them, and they were talking about they don't belong at home anymore.
Mm.
What do you mean? Well, the last time we had leave, we went home. One was from Tennessee, the other was Kentucky. And they said they went back and they saw their friends that they had left when they enlisted in the service. And one of them said that they're still busy smoking crack behind the 7-Eleven. And that's not me. And I don't fit in there anymore. So go home to see my family, yes. But he said after a night or two, I really didn't want to go out and see my friends anymore because they weren't my friends anymore. And it just stuck with me for these decade or so since then about how things change. But I was amazed at the reach we have as a country and as a military.
Yeah, I mean, I think about a lot of different things. I traveled with UNICEF to a year, right, actually the month before the pandemic, and I just like the incredible work that they do. Like I think I have become, as I've gotten older, maybe more sensitive, but maybe much more appreciative too, seeing people that dedicate their lives to things that we, don't even know about. Sometimes we go through like, I gotta, I gotta work on, whatever it is. And we don't realize all the time what everybody is doing to make things go around.
Bring it back to our lives today. You've done a lot of work in terms of relationships, and here at the Flowers Companies and what we do at our celebrations, publications, and podcasts, we talk a lot about relationships, as we feel, as I'm sure you do, that no matter what else happens in life, the key to our success, our happiness, our growth, our development is good, healthy relationships. Uh, when you had a full-time job in a place-based situation in the newsroom, you develop relationships at work. Work is not just about going and getting a paycheck and doing the job and going home. It's social too. In your new world, where you have these many different responsibilities and this big social media presence, how do you think about maintaining good, healthy friends, relationships, men and women in your life that do you have to be more deliberate now about contact, about reaching out and staying connected?
100%. And I noticed, and it's an interest, it's a whole other conversation. But I also noticed that I miss it when I don't have it. I actually really miss it. And maybe it's because now I'm not working in a newsroom every day, but I do really, set time aside at night or when I'm out on a walk in the morning to make phone calls, talk to people, see if I can set things up and deliberately set up times to meet. Yeah. And I never did that before because maybe that was being fed in another way. Maybe it was because was at work and I was seeing people and it just felt like more, but I just have always felt that's important, but I didn't realize how much I would miss it. And so it has been a lot more deliberate of late. And I also spend a lot of time reading a lot of the comments that come to me from women, especially if I'm posting something about dating or divorce or being single or, going back out there and dating after divorce. So I'm aware of that. And I feel like not only deliberate, but appreciative of the relationships that I have. And
But you had more than a toe in that water for a long time. You worked and helped people in matchmaking situations.
yeah,
That must
yeah.
have been really interesting in terms of being able to help people, developing a sense for relationships that will work and don't, and then being surprised every once in a while by one you
How
never
does this
thought would work.
It worked on paper. Yeah, I did. I think I always think that when I think about that time, I always think about like around Valentine's Day or around the holidays when everyone's like, love, love, love. And so I remember speaking of when Valentine's Day, we went out on the sidewalk and like gave out roses to single women, or well, all women, but like women, and we would hit a single one or two that weren't going to get flowers that year, so I always pay attention to those kind of things because I think that sometimes in our society, we're like this couple or this relationship or you're dating. And I spent a long time not being in a relationship. And so I always try to pay attention to that too. And that's why a lot of my content is, talks about that, is like having that good relationship with yourself. So then you can open your circle and have a community, and then you can have a type of relationship that is good for you.
It seems to me in your social activity that people do genuinely seek you out very often for relationship help and dating help and I can't imagine being in the dating world. I've been married for 50 years and I just can't imagine. So I would think it's a tough thing, and to have someone like you who can be so genuinely helpful must be a great comfort to the people in your network, in your community, who are fortunate enough to have access to tap into you.
I don't know. I hope so. I hope in whatever small way I can. I think that I think that what is really important, you said the word, it's relationships, no matter whether it's romantic or dating or marriage or whatever it is. But
Or it's with your 84-year-old dad who you're coaching on his
I
lifestyle, saying,
know.
"Dad, you got to take better care of yourself. You're going to
I
live past
do.
100."
I feel like he rolls his eyes when he sees my face come up on his phone, but he takes the call anyway, most of the time.
And I have to ask you, because you covered New York so long and so well. What do you think of the state of New York City today?
The state of New York City in the cleanliness, in the people, I love New York. I love New York. I think that the pandemic hit us. I think, we've come back in so many ways. I do think that I find people to be a little more patient than before. I don't
Do
know that
you?
everyone would agree with me. Yeah, I do. I feel like every once in a while, I mean, look, not everybody, but I think every once in a while when people get worked up, they're like, okay, wait a minute, there's other things out there that we never knew. Like that time, we couldn't even envision that we'd be living in a world like that with
Mhm.
like no one in Central Park and nobody and looking down the middle of Times Square and not a single light or traffic or car or, I mean, could you imagine what this, I mean, I know it was all over the world, but like our city is this big, busy energy hub. And so I guess I do. I feel that way. I mean, look, I don't think everybody can, there's no absolutes, right? But yeah, I love New York. I get sad sometimes. A lot of my friends have moved away. And so I was like, wait a minute, we're still here. But I love this city. I love using the park. I love being, going to Broadway. I love walking around downtown.
You take the subway?
I do. Yeah. Yeah, I do. I know the subway's like been hit harder than everywhere else for
It
sure.
has.
There's no
Mhm.
question about that. That part makes me sad because I do think that that is the one thing that moves, has moved this city around for a long time. And I think that
Sure
that
has.
that's a difficult part because I think we always would pride ourselves on the fact that you could say as somebody who lives here to a tourist or anybody, but to a tourist or an older person or whoever it is, like our subways are safe. Like I've lived in cities where you would not go on the subway.
Sure.
But New York was never that city before, so that part does make me sad. There's no question about that. Still take it regardless, but I'm much more aware of that change.
You might remember the day we were together at the women's event over on the West Side.
Yeah.
One of the ladies who put on a program, a panel, was Sarah Feinberg. And Sarah's a friend, and she ran the MTA for 2 years, right up to and including the beginning of COVID. Then got into a little disagreement with a fellow who was governor at the time, not to mention his name, Andrew Cuomo, and she chose to leave. But she did so much good work during those 2 years that she was running the MTA. And then to see it come apart in COVID has been sad to see. But then on the other hand, you mentioned the very beginning of this one. I remember it was Wednesday, March 11th, 2020. We had a breakfast at our office in New York. I had a bunch of young entrepreneurs around the table who were just amazing and exciting and had all these crazy things going on. And then Madison Square Garden canceled that night, and the NBA canceled that night. I think they had the Big East tournament at Madison Square Garden. And I remember taking the train home that night, the Long Island Railroad, got in at Penn Station, and I said, "Oh my goodness, I'm the only person on this train. This
Isn't
is
that
real,
crazy?
and it's
I
going to be
know.
scary."
I know. I know. I know. I remember that day very well. There was a Women on Broadway event that morning, and on the so it's all women that we were on panels and stuff. And there was one lone bottle of disinfectant, like a, Purell on the thing. And everyone was like, I guess we should use this. I don't know what's going on. Real. I mean, like, we just didn't know. And I never forgot, we were in an auditorium of people. I had just gotten back from Tanzania. I'd been traveling with UNICEF, and yeah, we went through the airport in Dubai, and everyone's like masked up. And I'm watching the news sitting in a restaurant in the airport. And I said, maybe I should buy some hand sanitizer. Like we had no idea. It's like I look back and I'm like, why didn't I buy 50 bottles?
Of,
But
of toilet paper too.
I remember I went in the gift store. I'm like, 3 bottles of hand sanitizer this big, and I'm like dousing myself.
I'll save the world.
Right? I'm gonna do this. So yeah, wow, what a time. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I know I've seen those kind of changes for sure. But I told you at the beginning, I've always had a love affair with New York City, and I've never wanted to be anywhere else. And so I was appreciative for the time that I had to be able to tell the stories here, and I hope that continues.
Well, to finish up then, New York City related, you've been there. You've been at all the changes in media. You were early to understand the interactivity and the potential to create community with the online world, particularly in your early use of Facebook and your early morning anchoring role. Uh, let's look down the road a little bit, 5 years from now. What obviously the big media companies are jiving and trying to adjust to this world. You have Paramount for sale, which is an old employer of yours at CBS. You have Disney having its activist fights. There's a lot of things going on in media, and you're at the forefront of that by saying, I can develop a personal relationship with an audience that's meaningful to me, that matters to me, that I think I can have a beneficial impact on. And I don't need to do all this other stuff. I can build my own brand and my own relationships because the tools are available for me to do that now. And you took the plunge and said, no, I'm going to do that. So how else does the media landscape evolve and change when you and I are having a cup of Joe 5 years from now? We're looking back and said, remember we had that conversation? Look what's happened.
I'm keeping this part. I really am, because I love how you say it. Look, I love to see that part of it. My goal and my hope is to be able to build a hub and a place that women are able to come to and have answers to a lot of questions. I feel like midlife, in general, for men and for women, is this very uncharted territory in terms of talking about it openly, or having a roadmap of some sort, seeing faces like ours in the media, and making it be okay to get older. So I'm hopeful that that's a lot of what I'm able to build. I'd like to see it be able to be more personal, so it is online but also in person. So I think that there's a combination of those two things. And look, I think the sky's the limit when you're talking about interpersonal relationships versus speaking to masses. And I think that that's an important part for me, and I'd like to figure out how to bridge that. I really would, because that's where I see it, evolving. And that was the part that I was having a hard time with, is that I didn't want to speak at people. I wanted to speak with them.
What role, if any, might live gatherings play in your new endeavors?
Well, I mean, I think we talked about it before. I think that you miss those relationships. I think you have to be deliberate about those things. I think you have to have those coming together of people that want to gather, to whether it's hearing about something, whether it's talking about something. But I also think it's about being a part of it. Like I'm not a big, I'm going to give a speech to the masses. You know, that's not what I want to do. I want to have those interactive conversations. I think that that's where we have to, that's what we have to do. And
Might
that's,
you convene groups together? Might you bring a group of
yeah, I mean,
people
that's my
together?
hope. That's my hope. That's my hope to be able to do that. So it remains online because I know everyone's not gonna be able to show up somewhere, but to be able to go online and in person. And I have a book coming out actually literally this week in a year. So I'm hopeful to be able to do that and to be able to go around the country and start some of those gatherings and, not do a traditional, I'm here to sign my book, but a gathering of people in different cities that, maybe not everybody goes to when they think about a traditional book launch.
So the book is intended to cover the subjects you've been so vocal and helpful on.
Yeah, midlife, menopause and finding meaning, and we are
Yeah.
working on the title actually, so that's where we're at right now, which
So
should be.
people can make their suggestions and send them to you
Yes.
now.
Send them my way. Send them my way. I've actually been, a lot of the book is kind of a focus group of people talking to me and just, kind of crowdsourced. And so, questions that I've gotten on social media. I've done a couple of polls for the title because I want people to feel a part of it too, because that's the point of it all. It's not,
That's
no.
that's the joy of having this two-way media and having these
Yeah, I love
relationships.
it. I love it. I really love it. So
Well, Tamsin, you're terrific. I've been a
thanks.
fan for all these years of yours, and to get to know you a little bit now has been a terrific opportunity for me. When we met, I had my wife, my daughter, and my granddaughter with us, and
Remember.
my granddaughter has brought your name up to me a few times. I told her I saw her over the weekend, and I told her that I was going to have an opportunity to chat with you today, and she just lit up saying, "Oh, she was so impressive," you know. So
Oh, it's so nice.
you make a big impression in a lot of people's lives, and no less mine. And I thank you for being so generous with your time today and sharing your story.
Thank you. Thank you for your thoughtful questions. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tamsin. We'll hope to see you soon.
Thanks.